Stonemeyer Games, and today I have a lot to talk about. A lot of fun topics, a few Stonemeyer things, and I'm happy to, as usual, to answer any of your questions. I want to start with a question that I'll probably repose later after more people have showed up. But I wanted to ask: Valentine's Day is coming up. What is your favorite game to play on Valentine's Day with someone you love? Um, I have an answer, but I'll pose the question later and answer for me. Although I don't even know if mine is my favorite, but I know it's a game that I am going to play with Megan on Valentine's Day. So what's going on recently? Let's do chocolate of the day. Chocolate of the day. Some friends came over the other day to see my new place or our new place, and they brought this chocolate called, let's see if you can see it, Civil Academy. It's 72% chocolate. I've had it. It's really, really good. I think this is a local chocolatier. And for 72%, which is a little higher than I usually go with chocolate, it's really, really creamy and delicious. I'm enjoying it in small doses, as you can see by having already opened up the package a little bit. What's going on today? So games that I played recently, and some of which I've talked about on videos, are Men at Work, which is a competitive dexterity game that I played the other day and did a video on Friday. Flotilla is a game, or a deep Euro game that really impressed me with a variety of innovative mechanisms, and even one mechanism that isn't innovative, but it's from Concordia and it's done really well. It's just one that I really like. I played that the other day, really enjoyed it, did a video on it yesterday. I also played some more Azul Summer Pavilion. I have now bought a copy, but I haven't picked it up yet, and that is one that I'm really, really enjoying, Azul Summer Pavilion. And something new for Megan and I, we Megan's group of friends, or a separate group of friends, I'm friends with most of them, but Megan's very close to many of them. They have an ongoing video game group, a digital game group, where once a month they pick, or once a month or every 2 months, someone in this group picks a video game, and these are friends all over the world. They pick a video game, and everyone in the group, if they want to, they play that game, and then they talk about it as they play at the end of the month, stuff like that. So it's kind of like a book club, but for video games. And this month, Megan and I decided to join in. And so Megan is playing a game called Regalia. And so far, I'm pretty much just watching. But as soon as we get past the tutorial, I look forward to being a part of making some of the decisions in the game. So I'm curious if you've played that, Regalia. It's Regalia. Or if you have any digital games, any video games that you've really been enjoying recently that maybe I would enjoy too. I don't play many video games at all, but maybe it could show up on the game of the month at some point in the future. Let me pop over to see if there are any questions before I continue monologuing here. Ian says that he's going to play Fog of Love on Valentine's Day. So if you're joining me now, the question I asked today is, what game do you think you will play on Valentine's Day this year? If you have someone you love to play that game with them, or what game have you enjoyed playing on Valentine's Day in the past? What's your favorite Valentine's Day tabletop game? Sonia said a game that we both like. She's saying Clank while eating raspberry Kit Kats. Is very specific. Carol says that they're going to be playing Clank Legacy on Valentine's Day. Yeah, let me stop there because there's some other questions coming up here that I want to talk about. But I'll say my answer. I think Megan and I are indeed going to play Fog of Love. Megan has not played. I've played twice with different people. And I think we'll enjoy it. I think, a romantic comedy board game seems like a perfect fit for Valentine's Day. And related to that, I actually just thought of this. I am looking forward to watch. I love romantic comedy movies, and Netflix just put. I think. Oh, what is it? P.S. I Love You. It's the sequel to All the Boys I Loved Before. Well, I think it's P.S. something. But I think that movie just went live on Netflix, so I'm looking forward to watching that with Megan too in the near future. So yeah, that's my question of the day. That's my answer. And let me jump over here. So there's some interesting questions going on here. I have lots of topics to cover today, but I'm happy to answer any of your questions. Chris says, how is your cat doing after his dental appointment? And yeah, this is one of the little, not fun topics, but personal topics that I was going to cover today. You can see Biddy in the background there. And Biddy is, looks like my camera's doing that weird autofocus thing. I need to fix that. Biddy had some teeth pulled the other day. I had to take him in for dental surgery on Monday, and he has bad plaque and tartar He doesn't like it when I brush his teeth, so I don't brush his teeth. And so he had to have 2 teeth pulled the other day. And he's been kind of sleepy ever since. He's doing okay. He misses eating Walter's dry food because Biddy is on a wet food diet, but Walter has dry food that Biddy sneaks out of all the time, and he can't do that right now. So, poor little guy. But he's doing okay. And now I'm distracted by this autofocus. Have you guys ever noticed that before in my camera? Like if I move, I think the camera, or maybe if I even don't move, the camera just autofocuses at weird times. I don't know how to change that setting. I think someone mentioned it on YouTube recently. I haven't ever really noticed because I'm live. Like it's hard for me to really tell. But let me know if you notice that in my videos that the camera is coming in and out of focus and changing what it's focusing on. Let me know. I need to find a fix for that if so. Brett says, thoughts on the Wonderlands War launch. He says, this is Brett, not Brent. He says he really doesn't like the exclusivity, but the game really intrigues me. I wanted to mention this and the Marvel miniatures game. Actually, I don't know much about the Marvel miniatures game, but yesterday was kind of a big day for Kickstarter for those 2 games, both doing very well on Kickstarter. Wonderlands War, I mean, I love the enthusiasm and passion that James puts into his games. The game is published by Skybound and Druid City. I think he did a great job building up enthusiasm for it and delivering a very polished project. I have backed for $1 so far because I'm kind of just following along, deciding where I want to go in. The $50 level is the most appealing to me because it's the cheapest. But I know from Quacks of Quedlinburg that drawing cardboard tiles out of a bag isn't as satisfying as drawing other, more substantial tiles out of a bag or tokens out of a bag. So I'm tempted by some of the higher levels that offer that. I was surprised by the exclusivity. Brett mentions that here. I don't know why a creator would do that. And especially James, if you're watching this, I respect the hell out of you. I don't understand it because by doing that, you can't sell those parts of the game. Any exclusive parts, you can't sell them later, and people are going to want them later, especially if the game is a big hit. So I don't get that. I don't understand it. Maybe you've defined exclusivity differently in this project. That said, I'm a backer. I'm enthusiastic about it. I love most of it. I was surprised by the exclusive element of, I think, one of the reward tiers, maybe more than one. But hopefully, despite that, the game will have a healthy retail life after the Kickstarter project is fulfilled. Rob says, I'm not sure this is a question, Rob, but you're talking about Flotilla. You said the 3 to 6 player format has given some customers pause to buy. Yeah, 3 to 6. I thought it was 2 to 5. I thought it only went up to 5 players, but I could be wrong about that. Chad says, how close to a convention should I start asking to make appointments with publishers to demo a game that I'm designing? That's a good question. In the past, when I've been at a convention, and I have accepted appointments, always at Gen Con, that's the only convention where I've done this, I've opened slots about 2 months in advance, so maybe 2 months. And make sure to check on their website first, because they might have just something automatic set up, and that's easier for them than you emailing them. But a lot of them probably will start with an email. Let's see any other topics before I jump back over to questions real quick. Some of my blogs recently, one was about stretch goals. I had an idea for a stretch goal system based on the Starbucks rewards star system. And I talked about it about a month ago, and a creator, Carlos, was working on a game where he thought that would be a perfect fit. And so Carlos launched Wishland on Kickstarter last week using the star system. And I wrote about it in detail on my blog on Monday. I've really enjoyed it so far, and really it's been one of the Kickstarter projects that I've backed that I've really actively participated in, one of the few that I've actively participated in a long time, because it's so easy when Carlos sends out a poll to just click on the poll and say, yeah, this is the stretch goal that I'm most excited about right now. It takes 3 seconds, it's fun, I feel engaged, I feel like I'm part of the project. I've been loving that. And the star system, I think, works really well for that because I can see how many stars we've earned and how many we're spending to get that stretch goal. Really, really cool system. I highly recommend checking out either that blog entry or the Wishlands post. And actually, while I'm saying that, I should mention that I put 2 links in the description of this video. and I have given no context for them. Basically, I was on two podcasts recently, and both of those podcasts went live over the last few days, or at least since my last appearance on Facebook Live. One of them was on Nerd Lab. I think the link is Nerd Like a Boss, and that was just a chat about game design with a guy named Marvin. It was a really, really great chat about game design. And then the next one was with Team Covenant, the Covenant cast, about retailers and distribution and selling directly, a topic that I talked about in detail last Thursday on our blog post, on my blog post, on the Stonemaier Games blog regarding why Wingspan is in short supply right now, why I've decided to sell the few copies we have directly to consumers and retailers rather than to distributors. So we talk about that topic on the podcast, and that there's also a blog entry about that on Thursday if you're curious. Ivan says he's played Civilization 4 recently and found that it's much better than 5 and 6, in his opinion. Have you played any of Sid Meier's Civilization games? 4th is the best for me. I've played a little bit of 5, but I think that's the only one. I didn't even know the 6 had come out. I thought it stopped at 5. Or maybe, but whatever the more recent one is that came out about a year ago, that's the one that I've played. I thought it was 5, but it might be 6. Steven says, let's raise a glass to those of us who will be playing solo games on Valentine's Day. And Steven, you're right. I mean, I've been single for most of my Valentine's days over the last, 10 years. And you're right. You don't need a loved one to play with on Valentine's Day. You can play solo games. You can play with your friends. So I don't mean to exclude anyone in saying what games you're going to play on Valentine's Day. Sean says he's going to play Rise of Fenris on Valentine's Day. Nice. I like that. Okay, let me jump back over to my topics and I'll look for other questions. My Sunday sit-down video this week was about Geekway Mini. So 2 weekends ago, I went to Geekway Mini, a convention here in town, and I played 13 different games, 11 of which were new to me. And so my Sunday sit-down video this past week was something a little bit different that I haven't done in a while. Or maybe ever really, where I ranked all of the games that I played at Geekway Mini from those that I liked the least to those that I liked the most. The two, I'll just spoil a little bit of the video if you want. The two that I liked the least, and they weren't even that I disliked them the least, but they had some pretty big issues, in my opinion, that would make me hesitant to return to them, were kind of opposite games on the spectrum. One was Zombie Dice, which was fine. I love Push Your Luck. It was fine for Push Your Luck. And the second one was Circadian's First Light, a game that had a lot of awesome mechanisms, but it had one key mechanism, a programming element that I really, really didn't like, and it seemed to frustrate everyone at the table. I was just baffled by that one mechanism, and it really held back the rest of the game. On the other flip side, though, I loved Silver and Gold. That was my number 2. And the previously mentioned Azul Summer Pavilion was my number 1 favorite game that I played at Geekway Mini. But if you want to know the other, 9 games in between that, feel free to check out my Sunday sit-down video this week. What have I been... Okay, Stonemaier stuff. I haven't really talked about Stonemaier news. I've been working on a prototype. I'm like in the prototype stage of one game, and I'm in the brainstorming stage of another game. I'm enjoying both of those processes. I'm not going to tell you which games they are. And I've been working on demand forecasting for 2020. So I have like a small focus group of distributors and retailers that I reach out to, or that I've started doing. I did it for Tapestry before. I'm now doing it for all of our releases in 2020, where I've given them information about these releases and I've asked them to give me their early demand estimates so that I can do a better job of making the right number of games in the first print run. Not too many, not too few. I want to hit that sweet spot. So I've been working on demand forecasting continually for really the last year, and I think this approach is getting better and better. I also did a little experiment the other day with our Stonemaier Champions. Kind of on a whim, I was writing the Stonemaier Champion e-newsletter. And if you don't know, Stonemaier Champions are people who contribute $15 a year to Stonemaier Games, and that goes primarily towards supporting the video and written content I create. But as an added perk, they get discounted shipping. In the U.S., they get free shipping. Internationally, they get $10 off everything they order from our web store to shipping discount. And I was writing and I also send this e-newsletter about like the most read blog posts and videos every month. And in the newsletter, in the moment, I was like, why not do a fun little flash sale? So I bumped instead of being like, essentially it's a $10 discount on stuff that they buy, stuff that champions buy from our website. I bumped it up temporarily to $15. Did I say 10%? I meant $10. $10. I bumped it up to $15 and for a 22-hour period. And I decided that 6 people, I ended up picking 7, 6 people would randomly, out of those people would randomly get a surprise added to their order, something that they didn't ask for, but something I specifically picked for them that I thought they might enjoy, and so they're getting the surprise in their package. And I was kind of blown away by the response to it in 2 different ways. One, there was a little bit of frustration and confusion because some champions thought they were going to get their free shipping plus $15 off, which was not the case. I can't do that. That would be free for a lot of items. We would lose quite a bit of money. But $15 off is the same amount that any champion paid just to be a champion. And for some, it's even more because champion membership was originally $12. But more than that, I was blown away by how many people placed orders within a 22-hour time frame just for an additional $5 discount. There were over 500 orders placed by champions during that time period. So it was kind of an eye-opener for me of the power of that kind of approach. I don't know, like a flash approach where people are given a reason to act now rather than wait later. And I think it was a combination of the discount plus the potential for getting a surprise that's worth a lot more than what the champions paid that helped make that happen. So I'm curious about your thoughts about that. I might do a blog entry on it soon, still debating whether or not I'm going to do that, but I thought I'd bring it up here to see your thoughts on that approach. And if you've ever seen like other companies use that flash approach, and if that's been effective for you or compelling for you as a buyer, as a consumer. Let's see. Vincent says, my next game is Viticulture or Tapestry. Which would you recommend first? Kind of depends on what you're in the mood for, Vincent. I mean, one of the games is very sandboxy. In Tapestry, you can do a lot of different things. There's a lot of asymmetry in the game. And Viticulture is very focused. It is a winemaking game. That is the thing that you are doing in the game. And it's worker placement. So if you're in the mood for worker placement, very focused, go with Viticulture. If you're in the mood for building an outlandish civilization the way that you want to build it, and it's not worker placement. It has this kind of its own mechanism. It's track movement, but in a pretty unique way. Give Tapestry a try. Yeah, it's up to you. Lovin says, ever heard of the new tabletop from Riot Games? I think you're referring to the new game from Riot Games. It's kind of a very streamlined, abstract, 2-player asymmetric game, and I have actually played it. Yeah, it's a cool little game. I played a prototype of it a while ago, but yeah, I have heard of it. I haven't played the final version yet, though. Amin says, do I start designing a game with a specific player count in mind and then modify it to work for other player counts? I mean, all the games that we publish have to play between 2 and 5 players. So every game I design is for that player range. And then ideally I bump it up to 6, and then Morton comes in and brings it down to 1. So I kind of design it for that range every time I design a game. Max says, what do you think are a few common mistakes that new cat owners do? That's an interesting question. I'm not asked many questions like that because I'm certainly not an expert on owning cats. I have owned cats for quite a while, but I'm not an expert on it. Common mistakes new cat owners do. I'll say one thing. I mean, this is an element of discipline. Very early on, Biddy was a pretty wild kitten, but I found that he didn't like being sprayed with a bottle of water, and he was very impressionable early on. So there was one thing he would do very early on is that he would chew on cords and wires, and I don't want him doing that. And so I would spray him with a water bottle to tell him not to. And he has retained that throughout his entire life. He learned very early not to chew on cords and wires, and he doesn't do that. I found, though, for other things that I've waited to kind of discipline or train him on later in life, he does not learn as well now. He learned much better as a kitten than an adult cat. So if there are certain things that you want to train your cat out of or into, I would recommend doing so when they are a kitten and not a full-grown cat. I think that can maybe make a big difference. At least it did for Biddy. Chris says, Starbucks happy hour prices on Thursday. I'm not sure what the question is, but yeah, Starbucks does have a 2-for-1, like buy one, get one free on Thursdays. Mike says he's going to teach our games at Gen Con again this year. Thank you for doing that, Mike. I really appreciate that. Yeah. For that, you guys had a great crew of volunteers last year. Mike also asked, have you, and for reference there, I don't typically attend Gen Con, or I haven't for the last couple of years, I think, but MeepleSource has a booth there, and they coordinate all the volunteers. They run the whole show. So while there is a Stonemeyer MeepleSource booth, I don't actually attend Gen Con. So we have Stonemeyer volunteers, but without me actually being there. Mike says, have I had a chance to play Isle of Cats yet? What have you thought about it? My only complaint is the complete lack of insert and trays. Yeah, I can see that it being a good opportunity for inserts and trays. Maybe they could take a note from In the Hall of the Mountain King for that. I played it once. I own a copy. It's on the shelf over here, and I can't wait to play again. I really, really enjoyed the drafting element of it, in addition to the polyomino aspect of it. But the drafting was my favorite part. Sony says, why is it so hard to get Wingspan from other places other than your website? So Sony, I'd recommend reading the blog post I posted last Thursday. The short answer of that is, well, it's kind of an ongoing thing. I don't know. We've made so many copies of Wingspan in the last year, but it sells very well. Demand typically is greater than supply for Wingspan. There are stores that have it on their shelves, but there are some that don't. Right now, very specifically, it came down to a small clerical error that I made, and combined with distributor demand being way higher than the number of games that we were receiving. And so I made a decision to sell what limited games we had directly, and then ask those distributors exactly how many copies of Wingspan they wanted us to make for them. And we are starting a print run where we are making exactly what they want so that they can serve their retail customers and retailers can serve their local customers, local and online customers. So basically for the board game supply channel, supply chain, it's always a guessing game. The publisher has to guess how many copies everyone in the world wants. And we don't want to make too many because then we're stuck with a lot of games, but we also don't want to make too few. And that is an ongoing guessing game for me. And that's why we sometimes have games in stock on our web store, even though they've sold out at other places. John says that the replacement parts system that we have in place is excellent. And John, thank you. I'm glad to hear that. That's run by Alan, and Alan kind of oversees it, and Joe, our other new full-time employee, coordinates that system in the U.S., and Joe's been doing a great job of that. Okay, Steven says, Lords of Waterdeep is sometimes put down as a basic worker placement game, but I think both the buildings and the intrigue cards don't get enough credit for being innovative mechanisms. I totally agree, especially with the buildings. I love the element of the buildings in Lords of Waterdeep, especially since you start out with a very streamlined and visible economy in the game, and the economy changes as you construct buildings. Stephen goes on to say, in particular, when you play an intrigue card, you get a small benefit, but you also get your worker back to use again. So the cost is a delay in how you use the worker. Any other games with delay mechanisms like that? And you're right, I do like that mechanism, that you're playing something right away, and then you get that worker to place on available actions at the end of the round. I'm sure there are other games that do that, but offhand, I can't think of any. Maybe someone else in the comments can think of other games that have a similar delay mechanism to that. Gerald says, if Scythe was published in 2020 for the first time, would I make the player boards like Tapestry to avoid any warping issues thick boards may have? The player boards. Well, so there are two types of player mats. I use the term mat for anything personal to a player. I use the term board for anything shared by all players. In Scythe, there are player mats that are dual layered, so that the tokens don't slide around on them. And I also have faction mats, which are that are not dual layered. So for the faction mats, yes, I would probably make them similar to the types of mats that we use in Tapestry. For the dual layered boards, I would keep them dual layered and probably almost exactly the same. Yeah, yeah. Chad says he's giving Red Rising, the book series that I love, another try. I'm saying that I love it. Sounds like Chad doesn't love it yet. He says, I didn't really like it the first time. I'm hoping now that I know what it's about that it will land better this time. Have I ever found that after reading a book the second time, you like it more? The second time, I would say it, I may have never read a book the second time that I didn't enjoy the first time. I've read only a few books twice because I have so many other books that I want to read, so many new to me books that I want to read. So, Chad, I don't think I've ever done that. I don't think I've ever not enjoyed a book and then read it again. I think the best I can say is that there have been a few books that I've put down that I probably should give a second chance, with probably the biggest example being Dune. Dune, I tried to get into it. I really, really tried. I read probably around 100 pages of it, and I just could not get into it. And so I put it down and haven't picked it back up. But a lot of people love the book Dune, so I probably should give that another try. What else is going on? I actually had a question. I'm sorry, I should have led off today with this, but Stefan asked me a question. Sometimes people who can't watch these videos live send me questions. And Stefan says, what is one of my eureka moments in game design? A moment where, whether I'm brainstorming or playtesting, probably playtesting, where something just clicks and everything comes together, and I have an idea that really comes together and makes the game better. And fairly recently, one big one was for Tapestry. Tapestry in the original stages of design had this massive tech tree. It was like the entire board was a tech tree. There was no map. It was just a giant tech tree board. And it had, I think, eight sounds right, 8 different tracks. There may have been even more than that. There might have been 12, 8 to 12. And each one had branching paths that split and then converged, and then split and then converged. And it was kind of worker placement action. It was worker placement plus advancing on tracks. So there are different ways to advance on tracks, and then on any given turn, you would say, okay, I'm going to select the current state on any one of those tracks and gain the benefits from it. And my eureka moment, it was overwhelming to see and play and use. It actually functioned fine, but it was still overwhelming. My eureka moment was when I looked at it and realized I don't need all these branching paths. Effectively, players are still just moving in one direction up these paths. It would work a lot better if I had tracks, single tracks that you advance on, instead of placing workers on them, which didn't feel thematic. I didn't really like that. Instead of placing workers on them to activate different spots on the tracks, just whenever you advance on a track, you immediately get the benefit from it. And it hugely simplified the game because instead of looking at a vast number of options at any given time, I think at any given time you had like typically around 24 actions to choose from. Maybe it was 12. It wasn't quite that many. But Tapestry's tracks ended up distilling it down to 4 options at any given time. That was my eureka moment when I realized that I could do the same thing that I was doing with so many different branching paths with only 4 tracks and a different action selection mechanism. Amin says, are you into indie music? If so, what are some of your favorite indie bands? I'm not sure exactly if a band is indie or not. I don't know how I can tell that. I guess whether or not they've been signed by a studio is the way to tell. But one of my favorite bands that feels indie is a band called Typhoon. I love Typhoon, and I don't know if they're indie or not though. What about you? I mean, do you have a favorite indie band? Tony says he just picked up and played Parks with his group this week. The production and quality of the components is extremely high, and it reminded me of Stonemaier games, and the artwork is stunning. While I really dislike hiking camping in real life, I found myself loving the game. Do you have a game that you love with a theme that you really do not like in real life? Farming. I don't enjoy farming in real life. I don't enjoy gardening or anything like that. But in board games, lots of board games, I do enjoy farming elements. I'll do some more questions, and I'll come back to a few little topics that I have. I don't actually have all that many left. Um, oh, I did want to show off a magazine that I do have a visual. I don't always have visuals. Chocolate of the day, by the way, if you missed it, was this brand, Civil Academy. And Senate did an article on Wingspan recently, and they sent me a copy of the magazine, and I have been really impressed with this. Like it almost looks a little bland by the cover, but the inside is full color. Like it is a really, they have Wingspan birds in there. It's a really nicely put together magazine. Really impressed by this. That's Senet, Senet, in case you're listening to this instead of watching it. Casey says that he purchased the expansion for Between Two Cities because of that email. He's referring to the Champion Flash sale that I talked about a few minutes ago. Casey says, how do you pick the winners of the extra stuff? Do you use any tool or is it more hands-on? Yeah, I used random.org. And I basically put, on random, you can choose the starting number and the last number. And I put in the starting order number, starting on when the flash sale began, and the last order number at 11:59 a.m. yesterday. And I picked using that tool. That's random.org. Ian says he used the flash sale as an excuse for my wife to get the only thing I was missing for viticulture, plus promos for Between Two Castles. That's awesome. People, I guess I shouldn't. I'm getting to the comments about the flash sale now. I won't read all of them out loud, but I'm kind of reading them to myself here. Stan says he and his wife are going to be playing with Wingspan with a European expansion on Valentine's Day. I like people that are saying games that both people in the couple really enjoy playing together. Rob says on Twitter today there were some comments about the prices of board game cons going up as well as the number frequency. Will we see more cons or less in the future? That's a good question. I don't know, Rob. It does seem like there are more conventions now. I certainly see more on the play and win list that I maintain. But in fact, I'll look to see how many are on this list right now. Play and win. I do see more people classifying things as conventions that maybe in the past I wouldn't call conventions. Yeah, there are 127 conventions on the play and win list right now. And there are way more than that worldwide, way more conventions. I don't know. So here's one take on it, and this is just off the cuff. My sense is that for some people, they don't have a regular game group or a regular time. Maybe they just aren't able to make time because of other commitments to play games on a regular basis. They kind of fit them in whenever they can. And a convention is an excuse to not be distracted by all the other things that we're distracted by every day and every week and every month of our lives. And so I think that's very appealing for people who just want to go to a convention and play games for a couple of days, that style of convention. So because of that, I think we could still see them continue to grow and expand and increase in number. As for the price of those conventions, I don't know. As time passes, things generally cost more, and so I think that's a symptom of it. I think I have never been off-put by the price of a convention, just because I feel like what I'm getting in return is well worth the price. But I can see that be varying widely based on the convention and the person's budget and how many people you're bringing. If you're bringing a whole family of people to a convention and you're paying $500 just to get in, I can see that being a huge barrier to entry. But I guess I trust conventions to use their ticket prices to cover costs and make a little bit of profit. I think conventions deserve to make a little bit of profit given the amount of time and energy they put into creating those conventions. Yeah, those are my thoughts. Adam says, when I bake a pie, the crust tends to be dry. What can I do about that? Add more butter. That's the key. Dave says, any plans on anything further on Scythe? So, Dave, the Scythe tabletop game itself, the world, we are actually done making stuff for it. We're going to continue to reprint it and support it, but we're done. The story is done. The story is over. So we're done making more stuff for it. However, I am considering making another game, a completely unrelated game, in the Scythe universe, which is actually called the 1920 plus universe. Yeah. Jeremy says, have I seen the dual layer player mats in Netatanka? And I have. A friend actually was really excited about them and showed them to me a few months ago. Jeremy says they're folding boards that are dual layer to prevent the issue of warping that those mats sometimes have. And yeah, I think that's really, really clever. Basically, instead of having two layers of cardboard that are glued together, it's a fold, and the top fold has holes punched in it, and you just plop it down, and then you have your dual layered mat. I agree, that's really, really clever. I do have more questions here. Let me see if I have any other topics. Today is my 8-month dating anniversary with Megan. I'm enjoying celebrating month anniversaries while we still can. So today's 8th month. And I was going to segue that. Originally, I was going to segue that into the Valentine's Day question, but I've already talked about Valentine's Day and that we're going to play Fog of Love on Valentine's Day this year. Steven says, in our recent play of Tapestry, everyone was commenting on how great the player mats were. That bumpy, tacky surface is really helpful in keeping things from moving around. I totally agree, and it feels good, too. It's called Frosting. It's a frosted player mat. Steven says, did I see that in another game, or is that your invention? Will other companies follow suit? I have seen it. I got the inspiration from another game called Monolith Arena. Sorry, I had to think about it for a second. And Monolith Arena, the mats are even nicer because both sides are frosted. I don't know if you really need the bottom side of the mat frosted because it's just going to be, like, you're never going to feel that. It's going to be on the base of the table. But they do feel super nice when you pick them up. And in addition to that, the Monolith Arena ones have UV spot embossing on it. They're incredible. Like, the UV combined with that that frosted nature is incredible. However, it's very expensive to make when you both frost both sides like they did and to UV, spot UV them. We couldn't afford that with Tapestry because that would take us way over budget. So I just did frosting on one side. But if you have the chance, check out Monolith Arena for those mats because they are stunning. They're amazing. Josh says, first time catching this live. Awesome. Well, welcome to your first live participation, Josh. He says, what's the number one thing that you would suggest to a first-time designer? The number one thing is, in my recommendation, would be to play a lot of board games. And play it, a lot of variety of board games, tabletop games, and play them through the eyes of a designer for the first time. Because you've probably played many games before if you're interested in being a designer. But have you played them while thinking about elements that you like, elements that you'd want to emulate? Paying attention to what players are having fun or what players are being frustrated by in the games. So play a wide variety of games through the lens of a designer. And I think that's probably my first recommendation to anyone who's looking to be a game designer. Mark says he went through all 3 books of Red Rising in the first trilogy on Audible in January. And he sees now why I would want to make a game based on that IP and why it's also hard to pull off. Mark says, any submissions yet that look promising? We did have a variety of impressive submissions. I decided not to go with any of them, and I kind of returned to the drawing board on it. But yeah, there weren't any. There were very ambitious submissions, but none that I decided to go with. Yeah. I would recommend the second trilogy too, Mark. He's 2 books in at this point, and the second book is massive. I think book 5 total is like 1,000 pages. So it took me many, many months to read through that, but it was worth it, in my opinion. Jake says, apparently we're talking about dual-layered mats today. Jake says, I wish more games would utilize dual-layered player mats like Scythe, and I'm somewhat surprised we don't see them more. Are they cost-prohibitive to produce? Do you know of any other games that use something similar? Games like Gaia Project, I could see greatly benefiting from these style of mats. There are more games that do it. I've seen a lot of Vitala Serta's deluxe versions of his games use dual-layered mats. Someone mentioned Netatanka earlier in the comments. The main thing in it, and one of my favorite games, Summit uses them. There are a couple reasons why you may not do it, though. One is expense. They are a lot more expensive because you need to print on 2 layers of cardboard and then glue them together, unless you use the Netatanka method, which is still more expensive than a regular mat. You do have an increased chance of those mats warping because as the glue constricts and expands and contracts over time, it can result in the mats curling and warping. And also, you have to be really precise with the size of the components that you're fitting into those mats. I'd recommend doing it with plastic components, but not wooden components, because wooden components can have slight variations from component to component, while plastic is a lot more precise usually. But even then, like with my Summit mat, the cubes don't quite fit into the mat. Cubes are a little bit too big. The size of the mat are a little bit too small, and it's very, you have to be very precise in how you calculate that. And really, I would suggest leaving wiggle room. Make the cuts in the mat a little bit bigger than the pieces. Mondo says, if a designer has a game that is similar in theme to a game that a publisher has already published, is it unlikely they will consider the new design if the game otherwise lines up with what they're looking for? In general, I would say yes. Like if you submitted another wine-making game to Stillmeyer Games, I would probably say no, unless it was some sort of take on the viticulture world. Also, thematically, it depends. Thematically, yes. In terms of mechanically, I think there's a little bit more wiggle room. If someone submitted a game to me that was inspired by their favorite mechanism in Scythe, but they took it with a totally different direction other than that one mechanism, that might be actually really appealing to me because you already know that I like that mechanism. You already know that there's an audience for that mechanism. And it also means that I have a mechanism that's easier to explain because I've explained it before to people. It's like worker placement. People know what worker placement is, so you don't have to re-explain it every time as much detail as you would other new mechanisms. So sometimes something familiar and recognizable, even if it's very similar to a mechanism in a game that publisher already has, can actually be an asset rather than a detriment. Rod says, do you have any plans to release something related to Scythe lore? Something like a comic or graphic novel? That would be awesome. There actually is something out there like this, Rod. Yeah, there's we do have the art book. So the Scythe art book does have some lore in it. And also Jakob, it's Jakob's world. So Jakob controls all that kind of stuff. And Jakob has a big book of short stories set in the 1920 plus universe. I think it's still only available in Polish though. So hopefully someday that'll be available in English. You might ask Jakob about it. That's a Jakob thing, not a Jamie Stegmaier thing or Stillmeyer thing. Kenyon says, Jamie, I know you're working on an LCG. Or to clarify, Kenyon, I'm thinking about designing an LCG, a living card game, expandable card game. And actually, my Sunday sit-down video this week will be on that topic. Kenyon says, in one of your streams, you answered a question about favorite LCGs. Your answer was that you don't have one and have only gotten into Magic. Have I thought any more on how to create a compelling LCG that will hook card game fans like you when you're really only into LCGs? What are your thoughts on maintaining a competitive scene for such games? This week's Sunday Sit Down, the one that's coming up in a few days, will be right up your alley because that's exactly on that topic. I don't want to go too into it here because I do talk about it in detail in that video. But I'll address your last question, which you said, what are your thoughts on maintaining a competitive scene for such games? And I would say if I ever design and release an LCG, I don't want it to be for tournament play. I do want it to be competitive, I think, but competitive in the same way that many of the games that we play at our game nights, our regular game nights, are competitive. Like I wouldn't design it for the tournament format or event competitive format. I know there are people out there that like that, but I think there are already enough games in that format that I don't need to put another one in there. I would just want it to be, rather than cooperative, I would want it to be a competitive game. Philip says, what is your top tip for my wife and I moving from viticulture to Tuscany? I really need to beat her. Well, hopefully the priority is on having fun and not beating each other in these games. But really, Tuscany is very easy to add to viticulture. It does add a little bit of, you have to read the rules, obviously, to get through the explanation of the bigger board. But there are videos out there about how to play Tuscany, so that Tuscany Essential specifically, so you can understand how to do that. But it's really, I mean, the learning curve is very low to go from viticulture to Tuscany. And Tuscany really does open up the variety of strategies you can employ. And it makes a two-player game, I would actually say it makes the two-player game a lot more satisfying because there are bonuses on the 1 to 2 player action spots that you can now use on the Tuscany board. Ivan says there is a card in Tapestry that allows you to regress on 3 different tracks and advance on the remaining track 3 times. Oh, he's just making a comment. I was thinking there was going to be a question at the end of that. Actually, the rest of the chat today is probably going to be questions. So let me jump through and just review the topics that I've covered in case anyone does have questions about these before I just focus on questions for the rest of the podcast. For the rest of the video, I talked about games that I played recently: Flotilla, Men at Work, Azul, Regalia, the last being a video game. I talked about blogs I wrote about selling directly to consumers and retailers for specific instances. I talked about a Starbucks-inspired stretch goal system that I wrote a blog post about on Monday. I talked about my last week's Sunday sit-down video was ranking all the games I played at Geekway Mini. This coming week's Sunday sit-down video will be about living card games. I talked about a champion flash sale that I tried that was way more successful than I thought it was going to be. I talked about how I'm working on a couple different prototypes. I'm working on demand forecasting for 2020. I talked about how the Tapestry tracks were a eureka moment in game design for me. Talked about taking Biddy, who's no longer on camera. Talked about taking Biddy to the vet for dental surgery. I mentioned Senate, a board game magazine. Talked about Kickstarter a little bit in terms of Wonderland War and exclusivity, as well as the Marvel game from Cool Mini or Not that's on Kickstarter right now. And I also talked about Valentine's Day games and 2 podcasts I was on recently, one the Covenant Cast and one Nerd Lab. So if you have any questions about any of those, feel free to let me know. So let's go over to questions now for the rest of the time here. Jacobo says, do you think some games have too many icons, so they're too hard to remember and the game experience suffers because of that? How many icons are too many in a board game in your opinion? I think a lot of it depends on how they're presented. And a couple different ways here, Jacobo. So Tapestry comes to mind. Tapestry has a lot of different icons, but I included two things here. One, I included 2 reference guides so that you can easily pass them around the table. I think 1 reference guide is too few. I'm looking at you, Kemet, one of my favorite games, but 1 reference guide is not enough for Kemet. And I also think it's really helpful in Tapestry that the icons that are relevant to you at any given time there are only 4 of them, and they're directly in front of you on each of the tracks. You don't have to know all the different icons and all the tracks. Also, there's a lot of repetition there. You're seeing the same icon used in maybe different ways, a different cost for the icon, or maybe the icon appears in triplicate instead of just once. So you can understand the icon, and then you can say, okay, that means I get to gain that resource twice. There are other games, like I'm thinking of Seven Wonders. Seven Wonders has a lot of icons. And one other thing about Tapestry is that it's public information. So at any given time, you can look at the board and say, what does that icon mean? Whereas in Seven Wonders, another game that I really love, the information is private, and you don't want to give that away necessarily. So you have the closed hand of cards where, especially with the leaders, you can't really ask anyone what these symbols mean because you're giving away information if you do. So that I think is a bit more problematic. So I really think it depends on the game's interface and how you're using those icons. The one other thing I'd mention is that I do really like it in games, and Deus and Flotilla are examples of this, where the icons are accompanied by explanatory text. And as soon as you know what the icons mean, you no longer need to read the text. You can completely ignore the text, but the text is there in case you want it. I think that is incredibly helpful. It removes the need for a reference guide, basically. Isaac says, he saw my video on Flotilla. Did I find the broken card that gave infinite actions? There's a very broken mechanism that we found playing that they issued in Rada for. We did not find that card, no. What do you think is the best way to issue errata for games already out in the market? I mean, we've done this in the past. The best way, I think it really depends on the game. I think sometimes all you really need is a little note to the Kickstarter backers, to your customers that explains it, that they can maybe print out and include in the game. Sometimes I think a card is necessary, and I think a nice way of sending out a card is to put it on, your web store at for 1 cent. And that way, someone, if they want just the card, they can buy it for basically nothing. They have to pay for shipping, but that's it. Or they can add it to something else on your web store that they want, and that relieves the burden, I think, from the publisher of that expense, optionally for some people. So I think that dual method, I think, works well, of providing errata components, basically. Sean says, do I see a lot of sales in Japan? Do I see it as an expanding market for board games? We have a great publisher partner in Japan called Arclight, and they sell a fair number of games. They're on par, I would say, close to France in terms of board game sales in their respective languages and countries. So yeah, board game sales in Japan seem pretty strong. Yeah. Stan has a long comment here. Stan says, would I consider adding a 6th food die to Wingspan to be used in 2-player games? That's an interesting question. I see your point here about, Stan says, in most of our 2-player games, it seems the bird feeder dice do not turn over very quickly, and we end up using 2-for-1 foods too often. It does help to reroll all the bird feeder dice when there is only one type left. We seem to shy away from getting food from the bird feeder and more often get it from activating bird powers. So I'm curious how you think that a 6th food die would help with that. It seems like it would almost hurt. So in a 2-player game, why don't you try, Stan, just out of curiosity, try removing a die the next time you play, because that, I think, would quicken it would increase the chances that you'll have just one resource remaining, or one resource showing, even if it just comes down to one die. Just spitballing here. Maybe give that a try and see if it works. Cody says, could I talk about the difference in emotions you feel when a Stonemaier game is voted number 1 in the People's Choice category versus a Stonemaier game winning the Kennerspiel? It's interesting. Because I had very different emotions here. I think a few of our games were voted very highly in the People's Choice, Dice Tower People's Choice votes in 2019 recently. And that felt really good. I mean, that's why I make games. I make games so that people can have fun playing them. That's why I make games. At the same time, I had a very strong emotional reaction to Wingspan winning the Kennerspiel, and I think a lot of it came from, honestly, like a sense of pride for Elizabeth. Like, I was so excited for Elizabeth, this first-time designer, this wonderful person, very talented designer, to win this award. I don't, like, if one of my own published games, my own designs, had won Kennerspiel, I don't think I would have had nearly the reaction I did to having one of our designers win the award. So I think that was the big thing. At the same time, I think Wingspan was maybe the number 1 game of 2019 on the People's Choice. I don't even know. But that didn't have the same emotional reaction as Kennerspiel. I don't know. There's something special about the Kennerspiel. It's a big award, and it just had a weird impact on me. Yeah, a weird, very unexpected impact. We are not an award-driven company. I don't promote our awards. I don't talk about it. I don't submit our games to contests and awards, stuff like that. Yeah. Gerald says, would I publish a Captain Picard's Vineyard, The Final Grape, a cooperative vine-growing vineyard Romulan defense game? Are you watching the TV show? That sounds awesome. No, I'm not watching the TV show, so I might get that reference better if I do. But I do think I've seen a preview of Picard on his vineyard in his retirement stage. But I don't know. I'm curious how long the show actually lingers on the vineyard before Picard is taken off into the netherworld. Josh says, what are my thoughts on a Stonemaier Games pop-up shop, a store that sells and demos all Stonemaier products that travels? It's an interesting concept. I've actually never thought of that, Josh. I don't know. It isn't something that I think I would invest time or resources or money into, but if someone was really passionate about it and wanted to give it a try, it's something that I could consider enabling. Yeah. Okay, Maggie says, my husband and I are obsessed with board games and play 2-player games often, but we'd love to have some consistent board game buddies to play with more players. Do I have any tips on finding others in our area who enjoy playing more serious board games? Maggie, though, my recommendation here would be to go to a few meetups and local conventions and make sure you ask everyone that you play with where they're from. And if you play with anyone that you really connect with, that you think it would be fun to play with on a regular basis, let them know. Tell them that you enjoyed playing games with them, and that you're looking to expand your game group a little bit, and you might draw in some great people. Pretty much everyone in my current game group are people that I have met randomly through first-hand, second-hand interactions outside of my game group, and I really enjoyed playing games with them, so I invited them to join me on a regular basis. Yeah. Ivan says, if I need inspiration for an LCG, I would recommend Jambo or the new version Asante. Have I played any of them? I have not. I'll have to make a note of that. Jambo and Asante. I haven't played either of them, no. Or actually, I don't even think I've heard of either of them. Maybe Jambo, but I haven't heard of Asante. Ernani points out that Terraforming Mars is another example of a game that uses icons but also explains those icons with text. Lawrence says, apologies if it's been asked if I missed any news on the Tapestry expansion. You haven't. I guess the one thing that maybe you might have missed is that on Instagram recently I did post a little hint at what's coming in the expansion. Just a tiny little hint. The photos itself are photos from the core game, not the expansion. But in the description on Instagram, it's Instagram at Jamie Stegmaier. It's not a Stonemaier Games thing. It's at Jamie Stegmaier. I post a little hint about what's coming. Tom says, I mentioned in my blog post, this is the last Thursday's blog post about selling directly to consumers and retailers. Tom says, you mentioned in your blog post that Wingspan has 300,000 copies in print. Is that a lot? Yeah, that's a lot for board games. Can you put it into context with other Stonemaier games and other non-Stonemaier games? I don't know about other non-Stonemaier games. I know that like Ticket to Ride is sold in the millions, but I think most games typically sell between 5,000 and 10,000 at most in their lifetime. To compare Wingspan to like Scythe has also sold around 300,000 copies. Viticulture I think just got over 100,000. Between Two Castles there are just over 40,000 copies in print. So I think Stonemaier Games, we're very fortunate to sell that many games. Even for Between Two Castles is like one of our least successful games, but we've sold 40,000 copies of it. So that's pretty amazing to me. But yeah, hopefully that context helps a little bit. Howard says Howard has a house rule. All right, I'll say your house rule here, Howard. He says, the only house rule I've adopted for Wingspan is an extra round for two-player games because two-player games were ending too quickly. That's fair. Yeah, I can see that. Jacobo says, do I know games with two-player boards plus a central board? Have you ever tried to develop a game like that? Oh, two-player boards plus a central board. I mean, Wingspan is kind of like that. There's a goal mat in the middle. Each player has their own separate player board. Two-player boards plus a central board. Like Scythe. Scythe also has... You have two-player mats, not boards, two-player mats that you combine together for a bunch of different combinations. I really like that system of combining two different things like that. You have your faction mat, your player mat. So yeah, I think that's what you're referring to, but you probably know about Scythe, so maybe you're thinking about something differently. Maggie says, how do I feel about house rules? You made me tell by my reaction a second ago. My thoughts on house rules are they're fine. I want people to have as much fun as possible playing our games. I don't want, and so I'm totally fine with people using house rules. That said, I don't want to debate or confirm or approve house rules in discussions and like online discussions, because in just a tiny small way, like I design games and I publish games with the mechanisms that I think are best for those games. I am not always right, but coming from that point of view, like that's how that's how I think about our games. I think, okay, we put the best product out there possible. I am open to constructive criticism, but a house rule sometimes, I don't know. It's someone asking me, it's like someone looking at your child and saying they'd look better in a different hat. I don't know, or even better saying that if someone says, okay, your child, if I had your child for a little while, I would dress them differently, and I'll do this. What do you think about that? And the reaction is like, this is my child. I dressed it this way for a reason. I'm not going to debate this other outfit that you want to put on my child. So I'm fine with house rules existing. I just don't want to debate them with people. Daniel says, when will the next Wingspan expansion come out, and can we still pre-order it? Pre-orders have not happened for the new expansion. Basically, we just had a charitable effort for Oceania, for Australia specifically, and the birds there. And I said we'll talk about everything else about the expansion when it's ready. So the answer right now is when it's ready, and it is far from ready at this point. Tom pointed out that Tapestry also has multiple player boards. Each player has 3 player boards in Tapestry. Michael says, he's just joining, so this may have already been asked, is Viticulture being developed into a digital game, and if so, where is it in terms of progress? Yeah, check out the Viticulture Facebook group, and you'll see lots of posts actually about the beta version of Viticulture Digital. It's coming along really well as far as I can tell. They probably need still a few more months to get it right, but it's coming along pretty well. Mike says, Wingspan is moving into evergreen status with other Admirable titles like Azul, Ticket to Ride, and others. Question, will we see any interesting promotional cards for Wingspan to promote the Cornell Bird Observatory, etc.? Currently, we don't have any promo packs other than the Swift Start pack for Wingspan. I think in the future we will try to make some fun promo packs, or specifically themed promo packs for mythical birds, for extinct birds, and maybe one inspired by Cornell. Yeah. So little promo packs here and there. We don't have any in the works right now, but I'm hoping that we'll do that someday. Jason says, is there a plan to release a professionally printed Tapestry balance rules to match the rulebooks? I dislike having it on a regular piece of paper in the box. Thank you for asking, Jason. In the expansion for Tapestry, the last page of the rulebook will be the current adjustments for all of the civs that have minor starting adjustments. So you will have if you get the expansion, you'll have that rulebook. Yeah. Mondo says, will you be at Geekway? And absolutely, yeah, Mondo. I bought my ticket on the first day to Geekway to the West. All right, I think we're right at time now. We reached the end of the questions. This worked out perfectly. Thank you so much for joining me for today's chat. And if you have any other questions, the best place to post them are in the comments on YouTube. I'm going to put this video on YouTube now, and that's where I'll get the best alerts for future questions. Have a great Wednesday and a happy Valentine's Day, and I'll see you next Wednesday. Take care.